This show is brought to you by our sponsors, easternshorебroadcasting.com, who are all about live streaming. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the Zoom R16. Now, I'd just like to start out by saying that I don't recommend the Zoom R16 over any other device. In fact, I run a Behringer UMC 404 HD and a Behringer UMC 202 HD, which is what I'm actually using for this audio now. But the R16 is slightly different from other devices that you can use to bring audio into your equipment. Let's have a look at the actual device. You can see we have lots of knobs and faders and things like this, as well as along the back here 8 XLR audio inputs. You can also put 1/4-inch jacks in there. We've got some headphone outputs and line outputs, which are 1/4-inch jack on the back as well, and a power input. Underneath the device, I don't know if you can see, but there's a trapdoor under there, and you can put batteries in there. Now, this device is designed to be a portable recording studio, and it's pretty good. It's got 16 tracks. You can put down 8 tracks at a time, and having put down some tracks, you can play along to the tracks you've already put down and record another track just like you could in a recording studio. It's also got some digital audio processing effects, so you can put on reverb and all the kind of things that you're likely to want to do if you're doing music. And this thing really is targeted at musicians, but it works quite well for video producers. When I bought this, I wasn't doing live production, I was recording everything, and we were recording the audio on this device, which meant that I had a WAV file effectively for every audio device that I got plugged in. So if we had 4 or 5 microphones on a set, I could bring those recordings home, and I had one recording for each microphone, which meant if somebody started making a bit of noise, or the audio went a bit odd, or there was some background noise or something like that, you could turn those tracks down and just have the one who was speaking turned on, and minimize a lot of audio artifacts and nasties. So from that point of view, it's pretty good. The recording media, just out of interest, is an SD card which just goes in the side of the device here. Excuse me. What's quite interesting about this device is that all these faders and the buttons and things here appear as a Midi device to vMix, and the audio inputs on the back appear as, or can appear as, ASIO audio devices. So you can bring in these 8 inputs along the back of this machine into vMix individually, which is kind of neat. The faders can be used then to control the audio levels of those inputs, and you can use some of the buttons, like this rotary button here is quite good for switching between your inputs, and there's some other buttons here that you can program all these buttons just as shortcuts in vMix. So here you have a device that's not only an audio interface but also a control surface, and if you're on the move, to have one box rather than having a separate control surface and separate audio interface can be quite a good thing. It's also only taking up one of your USB ports. So if you're using a laptop or something like that where you've got restricted amounts of USB, this is two devices in one effectively, and can save you a USB port. So let's go ahead and have a look at how to set this up. Okay, on the side of the R16 there are two USB ports. One of them's a USB host port, which is like a normal sort of printer type thing, this sort of shape. Don't know if you can see that on there easily, but sort of standard printer cable for a USB 2 device. And the other one is a normal USB 2 port. The one we're interested in is the host port. And when we plug the device in, if I get the plug the right way up, it will spring into life. Now, hopefully I can show you that the screen here has gone orange and it's coming up with some words on the display. You can see it says audio interface. Now that's because I've plugged in the USB cable. There we go, just get that a bit closer so you can see it. Now I'm not using a power supply on this, but actually I am. What I tend to do underneath here in this little trapdoor, you can put in a set of batteries, and if I remember rightly it takes 6 AA batteries, which will run the device for a number of hours as a recording studio, but in this kind of use it actually will run for a number of months just with those batteries, and it just saves having an AC power adapter. The device does come with an AC power adapter, but I like to keep all my audio stuff off the mains if I can, because it reduces the chance of picking up noise and that kind of thing. So it won't work on the USB on its own. It does need the batteries in there just to support it, but it uses so little power that you won't really notice it. It's important that you plug this in before you start vMix, and it's also important that you tell it you want it to be an audio interface. So if I just switch this around again so you can see it on our little camera over here, what I'll do is I'll zoom this out slightly so you can see what I'm pressing on the buttons. Now at the moment you can see it says audio interface on the display, so let's just pan this down very slightly and zoom out a bit so you can see. That's probably about the best position. So it says audio interface on the screen at the moment, so what you have to do before you start vMix is to press OK, and then it says, I can't actually read it, let me just have a look what it says. It says audio interface enter. Now the reason it's gone through that second step is that you can tell it you want it to be a mass storage device. If you change the menu from audio interface, it goes on to mass storage device. So we press enter again, and then it says continue or reset. I don't know if you can actually read that on there, but it says continue or reset. So we just want to continue, so we just press enter again, and now it's in audio interface mode. I'll try and zoom in on that for you a little bit. Now you'll see at the moment it says the sample rate is 44.1 kilohertz. Now we obviously want 48, but don't worry, vMix will sort that out. But you can see it's now in audio interface mode. So now we can start vMix. However, if this is the first time you've used this device, you will need to install some drivers on your computer. I've had a few issues with the drivers over time. The ones I'm using now are the version 2.0.0 version of the drivers, which are downloadable from the Zoom website. What we will do is flick to the laptop here. Okay, so the drivers we're using, this is what you get in the zip file when you download it, and if we have a look at the PDF document, you will see it says version. I can't highlight it for some reason. Oh, there we go. Version 2.0.0. And that's the important thing, and this will actually guide you through installing all the drivers. There are two drivers. One is the standard sort of Windows audio driver, and what that will give you is it calls it a line driver. So it'll appear as Zoom R16 brackets line in your audio interfaces, and you get all 8 channels in on one input, which is actually quite useful because they're perfectly in sync when you use that. When you use ASIO audio, the synchronization can be slightly out, but I found that with the Behringer and all sorts of other devices as well. It's not significantly out, but if your microphones can all hear each other, you may benefit from actually using the line driver over the ASIO driver because you don't get the sync problem. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes, but if you're getting funny artifacts with your audio, like it sounds very roomy yet you're in a fairly dead sort of room, then it could be an audio sync thing. As I say, we'll come back to that. So you need to install the drivers. The drivers support Windows XP or later. You just have to make sure you download the right ones for your particular computer. They do recommend, if you already had a driver installed, that you uninstall the previous one. So if you have got one of these devices and you're having trouble with it and you're going to change the driver version, make sure you uninstall the old one first. So just a quick flick through the document. The driver installation procedure is pretty standard. I'm not sure if I installed Sonar. No, I didn't. Now they show here in the documentation that you can choose which drivers you want, and I left the Sonar one off, and yeah, pretty standard installation procedure. Worth looking at the documentation because there are a few funnies, but I've not had any trouble with it myself. It's all pretty standard, and the driver, by the way, is called Zoom R16 R24. I suppose I could blow this up a little bit and then it'd be easier for you to read. So the device driver is Zoom R16 R24 when you're going through it. So there you go, and then they talk about the uninstallation process should you require it. Okay, I've already installed the drivers on this laptop, and you saw I've just plugged it into the USB 2, which is all this needs. So let's now go into vMix and see how we can see this device. So I'll just close these windows I've got open here, and we'll open vMix. Okay, so here you can see our vMix desktop. I'm just using vMix Basic HD for this. This is a little laptop I use for bringing audio in via NDI in our productions, because that's another way of avoiding using a USB port on the main computer. We can actually use a secondary laptop to bring the audio in. Again, something else to talk about another time there, but just worth knowing. So we can add an audio input in the usual way. So you click Add Input down at the bottom, wait for it to come up, and then we choose an audio input, and we go up here and select the name of the device. Now you'll remember from what I was saying earlier, there's a line driver, which is the line Zoom R16 R24 audio interface, and there's the Zoom R16 R24 ASIO driver. Let's start with the line driver. It's the simplest one. I'm going to do muting headphones here because you wouldn't normally want to hear your own voice coming back, of course. Mind you, if you're using the audio interface to record other people and you're just producing, then you may well want to monitor the audio just so that you can hear what's going on. That would be advisable. So we'll choose just the line driver to start with, and immediately you can see we have a little bit of audio coming in here. Now if I actually set this thing, it has got built-in microphones, and if I just whiz this camera back and again somewhere where we can actually see everything, right, so and then I want 5. So on here we don't need to actually plug any microphones in to test this, because there are 2 built-in microphones, one here and one here, which is just off the edge of the picture. How unfortunate. Anyway, there's a switch here that we can do for microphones on, and when I do that, if I turn these up, we will get levels. Now I'm trying to show the camera here that as I'm speaking you can see the levels going up and down on the front of the device, and if I make a lot of noise there's a peak light that comes on there as well. So those are quite handy to let you know whether your audio levels are approximately right. So now we'll go back into vMix, and you can see that my when I'm speaking that it's actually making the audio level go up and down in vMix. Okay, so we can now go back to vMix and have a look at how this device configures. So in vMix you can see we've now got our audio line input has appeared in the audio interface part of vMix in the audio mixer. If your audio mixer isn't visible, you may just need to press the audio mixer tab to make it pop up, and you can actually pop it out as well, which can be useful. I'm gonna keep it docked just for tidiness. I'm not a tidy person, but I find that I do like to keep the display reasonably tidy with vMix, because you can have an awful lot of stuff open. It's useful to have millions of monitors connected, I think, because then you can just have everything open, but that's not very portable. So anyway, back to the subject. If we go into the gear wheel here in the audio input, you can see we get the audio settings. It's worth checking that the device volume is set to 100%, or turn it down if you need to. You can see actually the levels about right here. I always think it's right to be just sort of touching the yellow, but you don't really want to be going into the red. If you get into the yellow it's fairly loud, but the default levels seem to be about right, and the yellow area on vMix matches the minus 6 dB mark on here, and I always think somewhere between 18 and 12, or certainly around 12 is where I like to hang around. So that's pretty good. We're not interested in the plugins at the moment, or the EQ, or the compressor, or the noise gate, but let's have a look in the channel mixer. You can see that we've got all 8 channels have come in because we're using the line driver rather than the ASIO driver, and that's important to note. The difficulty with bringing everything in on the line driver is that although you can fade the faders that you can see on the interface here, which do the job, there are currently no shortcuts that I'm aware of to actually control those faders. You can control channel 1 and 2, but beyond that you can't control the rest of the channels. I'm hoping that we might actually get some shortcuts to enable you to use the line input and shortcuts together, because I think that would be rather good, and it overcomes some problems with the sync, as we were talking about earlier, because all these 8 inputs are coming into the one audio input in vMix, so they're all getting processed at the same time rather than as separate inputs. So there's just, like I say, tiniest hint of delay sometimes, maybe only a millisecond, but this does get around that. So that's pretty easy. You can bring your inputs in like that, set them up. If that works for you, that's the way I would do it. However, if you need to control the audio levels from each of your inputs, you're going to have to look at the ASIO method. So let's switch back to the computer. We'll close this out. We'll get rid of this input that we created before. And now we'll have a look at bringing in an ASIO input. My audio that I've got set up using the built-in microphones on this device is coming in on channels 7 and 8. So what I will do is add channel 7 to our production so that we can see how this works. So let's go and add an input in the usual way. It's an audio input, and we'll select this time the Zoom R16 R24 ASIO driver. Then we need to choose the channel. Now this thing is a bit strange because there are no numbers on the channels, and I guess this is Zoom's driver not reporting the things back, so you have to count, unfortunately. Now, the first 4 inputs are dual channel stereo type inputs, so this is 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8, and then you've got below it just input channel, and that's listed 8 times. So to get number 7, we will have to count down through those inputs till we actually locate number 7. So that's channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, I could just have gone to the bottom and gone up 1, but I didn't think of that straight away. So we'll select the input. I'm going to do muting headphones, and okay, now you can see immediately the audio meter is bobbing up and down as I speak. We have an audio input here, so let's click on the settings and we'll see that it's slightly different. If we go down to the channel mixer, it's showing 2 channels, but it's actually only 1 channel of mono sound in reality, but vMix obviously does everything with left and right. And in fact, if we go into the channel matrix, you can see how it organizes things, but I guarantee you that is just 1 channel of audio. I've just turned off channel 7 on the device, and you can see it's disappeared now, so I'll switch it back on again. So it is only mono, which is correct. That's what we selected. You can of course bring stereo inputs in. You just choose one of the first 4 devices. Okay. So having done that, well, that was pretty plain sailing, but now let's have a look at how we can use the control surface side of the device to enable us to actually control the level of that input. Now of course we can just move this level up and down with the mouse, but that may not be terribly convenient during a production. So this device appears as a MIDI device to vMix, so we can simply create a shortcut and then use one of the faders on the actual device. In this case, I think I would use number 7, as this is input number 7, but we can use one of those faders to actually enable us to remotely control through the device itself that level. So this is fairly straightforward. Most people are probably familiar with how to create a shortcut, but I'll just go through it very briefly. So we go up to settings and wait for a bit. Here we go, and then we can go to shortcuts. and you can see I've got nothing in my shortcuts, it's empty. So we'll click add, and then what you do is click find, and then this is the magic bit. Now we move the fader that we want to use, which in this case is number 7 here. We slide that up and down. So as I was saying, we slide that up and down and it should detect it, but it hasn't. Okay, so this is good, because it probably means I haven't enabled this device as a MIDI controller, so it was a step I forgot to tell you. So we will backtrack just slightly here. So before you can actually add the fader number 7 as a shortcut, we need to actually enable the R16 as a MIDI device. So let's go back into the Zoom settings here. You can see it's not seen anything when I move this, so I'm going to cancel out of these things and go into MIDI settings. So you've gone settings, then shortcuts, then MIDI settings, and you can see that the device has been seen, but it's not enabled by default. So we click the little box next to it and press OK. So now now I should be able to add the shortcut. So let's go back and go through that procedure again. So again, if you're not already at this screen, it's settings, then shortcuts, and then we press add and press find, and then you move the fader on the device that you wish to use, and you can see now it's picked up the movements that I'm making, and you can see the numbers changing. When I put the fader down to 0, or completely at the bottom of its scale, the velocity is 0, and as I slowly move it up, you can see the numbers counting up there to 127. So vMix is now seeing our fader, so we can press OK. Then we have to choose a function, and in this case we want to do an audio function, and we want to be doing something like set volume. There we are. So we've chosen set volume, and then we have to choose the input number of the input we wish to do. Now our input is number 1 here, so I'm just going to choose number 1, and you can see it says audio input channel 1. We'll give it a title just in case it appears somewhere where we need. So it's channel 7 fader, something like that. That'll do. I don't think there's much point in showing these in the web controller because you can't do fades. There's no kind of fade function in the web controller, so I would uncheck showing this in the web controller because it's just taking up space that is quite valuable. So we'll uncheck that one and we'll do OK. Now immediately this should be active, and in fact if I move the fader up and down on the R16, you can see that it's moving the fader up and down in vMix. Super cool. So you can add up to 8 of your inputs and then set up shortcuts to control the volumes on those 8 inputs. So all your faders here on the device can be used to actually control the output levels for the production. One of the kind of nice things about the way the R16 works is the knobs across the top, which if I just switch back over here, this row of knobs here is your gain controls for each of these channels. So what you can do is to set the fader right up to the top, for example like our fader here for number 7, and then use this control to set the level so that it's the correct level, and then whenever you fade this fader right up to the top, the level's always going to be correct. It's not going to be over the top, which is quite nice, particularly if you're a one-person production and you you've got a lot to concentrate on, it's nice to know that if you push that right up to the top, it's not going to go over. You can always tweak it, of course, during production, so that's quite nice. It's a bit like, you know, similar thing to a mixer, really, in that respect. You would try and use as little gain as possible, but just enough to give you the level of signal you need. So that's about it in a nutshell. All the buttons on here can be, apart from those, this row of knobs here, these can't be programmed. The little switches here can't, because they are actually functions of the device. There's a high Z input on number 1 option. On inputs 5 and 6 you have phantom power, which you can enable or disable. On 7 and 8 there's the built-in microphones, as we mentioned earlier, and there's a metronome and things like that here, and again that switch can't be used, but everything else to my knowledge can. All these buttons here can be programmed, all these buttons here can be programmed, all those, that one and this rotatey one can be. All the buttons across the top of the faders can be programmed, and the faders themselves can be used as shortcuts. The only thing I've not really managed to suss out, I've sort of had some success with it, is there are LEDs with most of these buttons, and in fact under the transport controls here there are LEDs which light up, and it is possible to turn them on using the activators, or turn them on and off using the activators. I think you could probably control the LEDs quite well. Some of them have got 2 colours, and I could only ever make them go red and they wouldn't go green or amber. So you can certainly turn them on, but they'll just come on in the one colour that they are, and I think you can turn them all off again, which is the important thing. So your mileage may vary a bit with the LEDs, but really that's not the point of this device. The point of this device is that you've got 9 faders on here that you can use. The faders don't have to be used for audio. You can use them as T-bars or you know, whatever, really, just to enable you to control analog types of things, and the push buttons work well to switch inputs, that kind of thing. And you might use the buttons over on the side to do fades or cross zooms, or just a plain cut, whatever you want it to do. And the wheel encoder on the side here is actually a great device for switching between your inputs. You can program it so when you turn it that way, it steps on to the next input in preview, and when you turn it the other way, it steps back to the previous input. So you get some feel for what you can do with this device. You really could do your whole production on this device if it's fairly simple production. Excuse me, I'm still not over this H3N2 flu quite fully, so my apologies for the coughing. Okay, hopefully that gives you some feeling for the device. This was pre-recorded, so if anybody asked any questions during the main while it's been playing out, I'm sorry we won't have answered them, but hopefully we can come and do some questions now the video is over. First time we've had it.
Is that Rion's? Yeah.